As a toy salesman for a Spanish company, I was in Spain on business. I was planning on staying there for a week while I took care of a few things. It seemed like a good idea at the time, so I chose to drive. However, I was unaware that this journey would take a dark turn. It was anticipated that the journey would take about 12 hours, mostly on the highway. Up until the rain began to fall, everything was going according to plan. It was thick and made it challenging to see the road in front of you. Then, out of nowhere, the rain's fury forced the closure of a portion of the highway. I was forced to take a detour onto a side road, which added 40 minutes to the journey. It was a hassle, but I figured I could handle it. My go-to music abruptly stopped as I continued down the unfamiliar road. I tapped the phone screen out of frustration, but to my surprise, even the GPS stopped loading. I had to drive blindly at this point, hoping I was going in the right direction. Driving purely on instinct for a while, I kept going, hoping I'd eventually find my way back. I arrived in a small, creepy town after what seemed like an eternity. The dilapidated structures, the dimly lit streets, and the eerie silence were like something from a horror film. But since I needed assistance, I plucked up the courage to exit my vehicle and walk up to one of the houses. I approached the first home and attempted to ring the doorbell. No response was given, and it was silent. I went to the subsequent house puzzled. Exactly the same. There is no reply. The same outcome was obtained from the third house. The town appeared to be deserted entirely. I walked up to the fourth house as my anxiety level increased. Something caught my eye in my peripheral vision just as I was about to knock. As my heart raced, I quickly turned my head, but nothing was there. I still had the uneasy feeling that someone was keeping an eye on me. I fumbled for my phone and lit up my surroundings with the flashlight on it. I felt a little bit safer, even though it was a pitiful attempt at reassurance. The fourth house also did not respond. Now it was obvious that there was a major problem with this location. Now I was pretty sure it was an abandoned town. Intent on going back to my car and leaving, I turned away from the fourth house. But then I saw a figure standing on the street in the dark. A human silhouette that was simply standing there and was fixated on me. I called out to them with a trembling voice after feeling a chill down my spine. No response to my request for assistance. While remaining motionless, the figure's face was obscured by the shadows. As my heart raced, I reached for my phone on instinct and used the light on the device to try to get a better look. When I pointed my flashlight on him, he immediately ran away, back into the dark. Without stopping, I ran back to my car after feeling a wave of panic wash over me. I needed to leave this place right away, but as I was running, I heard someone running right behind me. When I arrived at my car, I slammed the door shut and locked it, gasping for air in ragged gasps. I then heard someone pulling on the door latch of my car. The same figure was now apparent when I looked up, thanks to the interior car light. It was horrifying to see, a face twisted into a grotesque grin, eyes gleaming with evil. When I froze, my mind was spinning. I was unable to get out of this situation using logic. I instinctively pressed the gas pedal, sending the car hurtling forward as the tires screeched in response to my survival instincts. I glanced in the rearview mirror as I sped away and saw the person still standing there, watching me. I carried on, tearing through the streets. Finding a secure area populated by people and civilized was necessary. After what felt like an eternity, I was able to regain cell reception. I immediately dialed the police, and as I spoke to them, my voice trembled as I described the unsettling encounter in the deserted town. But the other end was silent despite my cries for help. There was no guarantee or evidence that they had left. Even the phone lines seemed to have absorbed some of the oddness of this place. The worry followed me around like a foreboding cloud, but I kept moving. What had I found in that deserted town? Who was that sinister figure? These questions kept bugging me as I continued, determined to get as far away from that place as possible. I still have a hard time letting go of that terrifying encounter. It serves as a reminder that the ordinary can occasionally transform into the terrifyingly extraordinary at the worst possible time. I went to Canada on my own when I was 24 because I was in love with the country's breathtaking landscape. I had the chance to experience my first solo camping trip in the wilderness. It was exciting just to consider it. I stocked up on food, drinks, and camping supplies once I arrived in a little town, taking care of all the necessities. Even further, I rented a vehicle to make sure I could get all of my possessions to the destination I had in mind. I got everything ready and jumped in the driver's seat, excited to see the breathtaking scenery that lay ahead. After driving as far as I could, I came to a hiking trail and parked my car there before continuing on foot. I had walked for miles before finding a peaceful clearing next to a small lake. I quickly built a fire to keep the approaching darkness at bay because it was the ideal location to make camp. I enjoyed the peace of the outdoors while sitting by the campfire. Rustling leaves provided the night's mellow melody. I initially explained away the sound, thinking it was just a curious squirrel acting silly, when I thought I heard faint footsteps. I ignored it because there was no reason to be concerned and kept enjoying my solitude. When it was time to retire for the night, I went into my tent to get some much-needed sleep. I distinctly heard deliberate, audible human footsteps when I heard them again. My anxiety level increased as I caught a glimpse of a shadowy figure lit by the fire through the tent fabric, and the sound grew louder. My body went numb throughout as I froze in fear. The silence was broken by a whisper that shook me to my core. The voice cried out, "Come out." I was at a loss for what to do as my thoughts were racing. The only response was an icy silence that hung heavily in the air, and I wondered who this invasive person was and what they were trying to get from me. After a moment of tension, I found the courage to open the tent flap and look outside. I stared into the eyes of a tall, lean man with a hood over his face, and my heart almost leapt out of my chest. Both his words and his physical presence terrified me. Threateningly, he said, You are here alone, vulnerable. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice getting stuck in my throat. In a chillingly direct reply, he said, I won't hurt you if you leave right now. I had a strong urge to run away, and the panic hit me all at once. I was outpacing my breath and completely unaware of the din of my own thoughts as I ran through the campsite and into the middle of the forest. I was surrounded by an endless sea of trees as I made my way through the pitch-black wilderness, and the distance felt like hours. I started to realize I was lost, and I started to feel more and more helpless and terrified. Then, seemingly by chance, I noticed a familiar sight, the clearing by the lake where I had previously made camp. I felt a wave of relief, though it only lasted a moment. My tent, supplies, and everything else I owned had mysteriously vanished, which shocked me, as I came to the conclusion that the man must have taken everything while I was running aimlessly through the woods. Fear tore at my chest. I made my way to my car after turning around and feeling dejected. My journey was motivated by fear and desperation. As soon as I was in a safe place, I called 911. As I described the terrifying events of the previous night, my voice trembled as I cried out for support. The police did not react as I had hoped. Much to my dismay, they assured me that incidents like this one, in which thieves prowl the wilderness and prey on careless hikers and campers, were not uncommon in this region. They are looking for camping stuff for them to sell to other tourists. My heart sank when I understood how accurate their claims were. The once beautiful and liberating wilderness had become a hostile environment. The hooded man's menacing words and the gloomy, cold forest still give me the shivers when I think back to that particular night. Even though the Canadian landscapes are still breathtaking, I am now less confident and at ease when I venture into the wild. My experience with nature is extensive. As a fervent hiker, I've waded through countless trails in search of the upcoming nature and the rush of discovery. I intentionally go on adventures twice a week to discover new views. But there was one trail, an apparent amiable old friend that would permanently alter my perception of the woods. When I arrived at the trailhead, it was later in the evening. Golden rays of the sun were waning, giving way to the night's black embrace. Most people would have turned around, but I couldn't help but feel that familiar thrill of excitement pulsing through my body. This would be a nighttime hike. The first section passed without incident. Even though it wasn't full, the moon cast a faint glow on the well-traveled path, providing just enough illumination for me to do so. But when you're by yourself in the woods, time has a funny way of warping, and before I knew it, I realized I had lost track of time. The forest was completely enveloped in darkness, and the path in front of me appeared to be shrouded in doubt. My initial certainty gave way to some uncertainty. The once familiar trees now appeared foreign, and the path that had been etched in my memory was beginning to become hazy. I ignored my unease because I was sure I would come across a landmark that would put me right. The markers I had left behind, however, had disappeared after a number of hours, having been sucked up by the night. The first strands of fear started to wrap themselves around my heart at that point. My resolve began to weaken as a result of panic's nagging doubts. As I became aware of how serious my predicament was, my heart began to race. I had to go back and retrace my steps to get to my starting point. However, instead of guiding me toward salvation, the force seemed to tighten its hold on me with each step, dragging me further into it. The sounds of cracking branches and rustling leaves became more ominous as they changed into something that seemed to follow me. The sense of being observed grew stronger, and I felt as though the trees were judging my intrusion from above. I was suddenly thrown into total darkness when my flashlight sputtered and died. I hurried to change the batteries as my heart beat against my chest. Since I was afraid of what I might see lurking in the shadows, I dared not look around because the metallic taste of fear was on my tongue. The sound of approaching quick footsteps then became audible to me. As I fumbled with the batteries, my fingers shook, and I felt a desperate need to move quickly. Two figures appeared before me as the light finally broke through the shadows. Their icy chuckles cut through the air and stopped me in my tracks, causing me to gasp. Two men approached me with menacing grins as their faces were hidden by shadows. As they pounced and struck with ruthless force, fear tightened my throat. As they ransacked my possessions, pain erupted throughout my body, leaving me helpless. Their fingers snuck into my pockets and tore my backpack, my lifeline, apart. As swiftly as they had appeared, they disappeared into the night, leaving me broken and battered on the forest floor. I struggled to get to my feet with everything I had. I stumbled forward by sheer willpower because I had to get away. My worn-out feet eventually brought me to a road, a narrow ribbon of safety that sliced through the oppressive forest. I was given a cell phone by a kind person who had stopped. I dialed the police with shaking hands as I described the horrors I had experienced. A glimmer of hope started to ignite within me as the police showed up. In the hopes that justice would be served, I spilled my story, giving every particular. They noted down my information and assured me that they would look into it. A call informed me that my wallet had been located the following day. In the midst of the darkness, a wave of relief swept over me. A minor victory had been won, despite the fact that the men were still evading capture. My phone and backpack, however, had not yet been found. As a result, the trail I had once thought of as a friend turned into a chilling reminder of the dangers that can lurk in the dark. That night, I discovered a difficult lesson. Even the most seasoned among us can become lost, both in the depths of the forest and in the depths of our own frailty.